What's up, YouTube? This is 82-0. Welcome back. So, it's come to my attention that Al Harrington recently claimed that he would bust Willis Reed's ass and if he played in Willis Reed's era. Let's unpack this, right? You guys might be wondering who is Al Harrington, first of all. I mean, he doesn't have the name power behind him like Willis Reed. And this is exactly what we've been talking about on the channel, where older players are being disrespected just for, I don't want to say newer, but more recent players clout chasing. You know, Gilbert Arenas, J.J. Redick, and now Al Harrington. Now, Al Harrington, he, for any of you who don't know, he started out with the Indiana Pacers. He made a finals appearance with them, didn't do shit. And go to the Hawks, the Warriors, didn't do shit with the Warriors. You know, they were the team that probably had a pretty bright future if they would have kept that core together, Gilbert Arenas and them. But nonetheless, okay. Al Harrington was a center and power forward. He was a stretch four. You know, he could shoot the three. He was a good three-point shooter in his era. He got as high as 43% from three-point line. But here's the thing. Willis Reed is the greatest, well, I don't want to say greatest, but one of the greatest players of his generation. One of the greatest defensive players of all time. I don't consider them to be similar in play style. I know Willis Reed bounced around from power forward and center. And maybe you look at his field goal shooting and you say, oh, he's a career 47% field goal shooting. That's not as good. He did have some seasons where he struggled. Particularly his early years. I mean, getting used to the league probably. But he did get pretty high too. He got up to over 50% field goal shooting in one season. But the point I want to make is, how can you compare these two in the same sentence? How is this even logical? I mean, Al Harrington never made an all-star team. Never an all-star, never won a defensive player of the year. I guess what you could say about him is he's offensively efficient. Sure. But I just want to point out one thing. The 68-69 season for Willis Reed, he led the league in win shares at 14.7. Now, the best win share season that Al Harrington ever had was 5.9. That's quite a difference. And Willis Reed was an MVP in 1970. He was runner-up MVP in 1968. All defense, obviously. Two-time NBA champion. All-star, multiple all-star. He's on the 50th anniversary team and the 75th anniversary team. So I'm just wondering where this delusion's coming from Al Harrington. If somebody wants to tell me the argument of Al Harrington over Willis Reed, I'm all ears, because I'm not seeing it, man. I'm really not. And if you go on Basketball Reference, Willis Reed, Hall of Fame probability is 97.3%. You know what Al Harrington's is? 0.0%. And I think this is what I can't stand about a lot of these newer, I don't want to say analysts or journalists, because that's not anything Al Harrington does. But, you know, some of these newer players, they just think it's so cool to shit on the older players. I just really don't understand the point of it, because all these older players, maybe I sound out of date saying this, but somebody has to say this. A lot of the older players, they put their all into the game. They weren't making these big contracts like today. And if they didn't make those sacrifices, right? If they didn't pursue basketball at the expense of pursuing other endeavors that might have gained them more money, you wouldn't have a modern day NBA. You know what I mean? The pay wouldn't have been what it is today if it weren't for those players being entertaining for the fans from before. So why don't these newer players appreciate the past players? Why do you want to shit on them, call them plumbers, when their contributions are what allowed you to make the money you make today? I really don't get it. I'd be thanking them up and down the wall if I was an NBA player. I mean, let's say I was a player today making these contracts. I would go out of my way to thank these old school players. But hey, that's just me. Not everybody feels that way. And I really don't understand where this attitude's coming from. Let's say, even for the sake of argument, that players of the past weren't as skilled as players today. This is another thing, all right? They keep saying, players back then, they couldn't dribble with their left hand. Talking about Bob Cousy, who's ambidextrous. They said he couldn't dribble with his left hand, which is a crock of shit. They say, they didn't have all these skills. Well, one thing you got to realize is the rules were such and such back then that they couldn't do all these dribbling moves. You think these guys just didn't know how to? It never dawned on them? Look at Connie Hawkins, right? An NBA player. If you watch his NBA games, you might think, wow, this guy can't dribble for shit because of the rules, right? But you watched him when he played street ball. The dude was doing crazy handles. You watched him when he was in the ABA, because the ABA was more relaxed about these rules. And that ABA influence came over to the NBA when they merged. You think it's just new? Like in 1980, someone discovered how to dribble with their left hand or dribble between their legs. These fundamentals have been around a lot longer than people think. Yes, the game evolves, but the fundamentals are always there. Defense, rebounding, playmaking, ball handling skill. Come on, these things are always been there. As long as, I don't want to say always. If you go back to James Naismith's day, obviously not, but I'm talking about NBA terms, right? Yes, I'm sure players in Willis Reed's day, some of them couldn't do all these crazy moves like today. But even if that's true, like I said, for the sake of argument, they weren't as good. Why can't you just appreciate them in their era? What do you get out of shitting on them? Like, what? I don't understand what's the purpose of making fun of a player who played before you. And to be honest with you, I kind of wish this happens to them someday. I'm not going to be sitting here 40 years from now making videos about players from 40 years from now should respect J.J. Redick and Al Harrington, Gilbert Arenas. I'm going to laugh if they call them plumbers or milkmen, So those are my thoughts. Let me know what you guys think down below about Al Harrington's comments. Do you think he's just blowing smoke? Let me know.